Hi Year 6 and welcome back to your home learning, and I hope everyone's had a really restful week break and just had lots of rest and had a really good time, and now it's time to be back and continue our learning. And today we're going to start with our reading. So you're going to read along with me today. We're going to try and get through quite a bit of chapter 10 in our book The Hobbit, and then you're going to have a reading activity to go and do at the end. And remember, they just escaped now and the dwarves are still going down the river. As soon as the raft of barrels came in sight, boats rowed out from the piles of the town, and voices hailed the raft steers. Then ropes were cast and oars were pulled, and soon the raft was drawn out of the current of the forest river and towed away round the high shoulder of rock into a little bay of Lake Town. There it moored not far from the shoreward head of the great bridge. Soon men would come up from the south and take some of the casks away, and others they would fill that with goods they had bought to be taken back up the stream to the wood elves' home. In the meanwhile, the barrels were left afloat while the elves of the raft and the boatmen went to feast in Lake Town. They would have been surprised, if they could have seen what happened down by the shore, after they had all gone and the shades of night had fallen. First of all, a barrel was cut loose by Bilbo and pushed to the shore and opened. Groans came from inside, and out crept a most unhappy dwarf. Wet straw was in his draggled beard. He was so sore and stiff, so bruised and buffeted he could hardly stand or stumble through the shallow water to lie groaning on the shore. He had a famished and a savage look like a dog that had been chained and forgotten in a kennel for a week. It was Thorin, but you could only have told it by his gold chain and by the colour of his now dirty and tattered sky-blue hood with its tarnished silver tassel. It was some time before he would even be polite to the hobbit. "Well, are you alive or dead?" asked Bilbo quite crossly. Perhaps he had forgotten that he had at least one good meal before the dwarves, and also the use of his arms and legs, not to speak of a greater allowance of air. "Are you still in prison, or are you free? If you want food, and if you want to go on with this silly adventure, it's yours after all and not mine, you'd better slap your arms and rub your legs and try and help me get the others out while there is a chance." Thorin of course saw the sense of this, so after a few more groans he got up and helped the hobbit as well as he could. In the darkness, floundering in the cold water, they had a difficult and very nasty job finding which were the right barrels. Knocking outside and calling only discovered about 6 dwarves that could answer. These were unpacked and helped ashore, where they sat or lay muttering and moaning. They were so soaked and bruised and cramped that they had hardly yet realised their release, or to be properly thankful for it. Dwal and Balin were 2 of the most unhappy, and it was no good asking them to help. Bifur and Boffer were less knocked about and drier, but they lay down and would do nothing. Fili and Kili, however, who were young for dwarves, and had been packed more neatly with the plenty of straw into smaller casks, came out more or less smiling, with only a bruise or two and stiffness that soon wore off. "I hope I never smell the smell of apples again," said Fili. "My tub was full of it. To smell apples everlastingly when you can scarcely move and are cold and sick with hunger is maddening. I could eat something in the world right now, for hours on end, but not an apple." With the willing help of Fili and Kili, Thorin and Bilbo at last discovered the remainder of the company and got them out. Poor fat Bomber was asleep or senseless. Dori, Nori, Ori, Oin and Gloin were waterlogged and seemed only half alive. They all had to be carried one by one and laid helpless on the shore. "Well, here we are," said Thorin, "and I suppose we ought to thank our stars and Mr. Baggins. I'm sure he has a right to expect it, though I wish he could have arranged a more comfortable journey. Still, all very much at your service once more, Mr. Baggins. No doubt we shall feel properly grateful when we are fed and recovered. In the meanwhile, what next?" "I suggest Lake Town," said Bilbo. "What else is there?" Nothing else could, of course, be suggested. So leaving the others, Thorin and Fili and Kili and the hobbit went along to the shore to the great bridge. There were guards at the head of it, but they were not keeping very careful watch, for it was so long since there had been any real need. Except for occasional squabbles about river trolls, they were friends with the wood elves. Other folk were far away, and some of the younger people in the town openly doubted the existence of any dragon in the mountain, and laughed at the greybeards and gammers who said they'd been flying in the sky in their younger days. That being so, it's not surprising that the guards were drinking and laughing by the fire in their hut, and did not hear the noise of the unpacking of the dwarfs or the footsteps of the 4 scout. Their astonishment was enormous when Thorin Oakenshield stepped in the door. "Who are you, and what do you want?" they shouted, leaping to their feet and groping for weapons. "Thorin, son of Thrain, son of Thror, king under the mountain," said the dwarf in a loud voice, and he looked it, in spite of his torn clothes and dragged hood. The gold gleamed on his neck and waist. His eyes were dark and deep. "I have come back. I wish to see the master of your town." Then there was a tremendous excitement. Some of the more foolish ran out of the hut as if they expected to go golden in the night, and all the waters of the lake turned yellow right away. The captain of the guard came forward. "And who are these?" he asked, pointing to Fili and Kili and Bilbo. "The sons of my father's daughter," answered Thorin. "Fili and Kili of the race of Durin, and Mr. Baggins, who has travelled with us out of the west." "If you have come in peace, lay down your arms," said the captain. "We have none," said Thorin, and it was true enough. Their knives had been taken from them by the wood elves, and the great sword Orcris too. Bilbo had his short sword hidden as usual, but he said nothing about that. "We have no need of weapons. Who return at last to our own has spoken of old, nor could we fight against us so many. Take us to your master." "He is at a feast," said the captain. "Then all the more reason for taking us to him," burst in Fili, who was getting impatient at all these solemnities. "We are worn and famished after our long road, and we have sick comrades. Now make haste, and let us have no more words, or your master may have something to say to you." "Follow me then," said the captain, and with 6 men about them he led them over the bridge, through the gates, and into the marketplace of the town. This was a wide circle of quiet water, surrounded by the tall piles on which was built the great houses, and by long wooden quays with many steps and ladders going down to the surface of the lake. From one great hall shone many lights, and there the sound of many voices. They passed its doors and stood blinking in the light, looking at long tables filled with folk. And here you can see a picture of Lake Town. "I am Thorin, son of Thrain, son of Thror, king under the mountain. I return," cried Thorin in a loud voice from the door, before the captain could say anything. All leapt to their feet. The master of the town sprang from his great chair, but none rose in greater surprise than the raftsmen of the elves, who were sitting at the lower end of the hall. Pressing forward before the master's table, they cried, "These are prisoners of our king that have escaped, wandering vagabond dwarves that could not give any account of themselves, sneaking through the woods and molesting our people." "Is that true?" asked the master. As a matter of fact, he thought it far more likely than the return of the king under the mountain, if any such person ever existed. "It is true that we were wrongfully waylaid by the Elven King and imprisoned without cause as we journeyed back to our homeland," answered Thorin. "But lock nor bar may hinder the homecoming spoken of old, nor is this town in the Wood Elves' realm. I speak to the master of town of the men of the lake, not to the raftsmen of the king." Then the master hesitated and looked from one to the other. The Elven King was very powerful in those parts, and the master wished for no enmity with him. Nor did he think much of old songs, giving his mind to trade in tolls, to cargoes and gold, to which habit he owed his position. Others were of different mind, however, and quickly the matter was settled without him. The news had spread from the doors of the hall like fire through all the town. People were shouting inside the hall and outside it. The quays were thronged with hurrying feet. Some began to sing snatches of old songs concerning the return of the king under the mountain, that it was Thor's grandson, not Thor himself, that had come back. That did not bother them at all. Others looked up the song, and it rolled loud and high over the lake. The king beneath the mountains, the king of carven stone, the lord of silver fountains, shall come into his own. His crown shall be upholden, his harp shall be restrung, his halls shall echo golden, the songs of yore resung. The wood shall wave on mountains, and grass beneath the sun. His wealth shall flow in fountains, and the rivers golden run. The streams shall run in gladness, the lakes shall shine and burn, or sorrow fail and sadness at the mountain king's return. So they sang, or very like that, only there was a great deal more of it, and there was much shouting as well as the music of harps and of fiddles mixed up with it. Indeed, such excitement had not been known in the town in the memory of the oldest grandfather. The wood elves themselves began to wonder greatly, and even to be afraid. They did not, of course, know how Thorin had escaped, and they began to think their king must have made a serious mistake. As for the master, he saw there was nothing else for it but to obey the general clamour, for the moment at any rate, and to pretend to believe that Thorin was what he said. So he gave him his own great chair, and set Billy and Killy beside him in places of honour. Even Bilbo was given a seat at the high table, and no explanation of where he came in. No songs had alluded to him even in the obscurest way, was asked for in the general bustle. Soon afterwards the other dwarfs were brought into the town, amid scenes of astonishing enthusiasm. They were all doctored and fed and housed and pampered in the most delightful and satisfactory fashion. A large house was given up to Thorin and his company. Boats and rowers were put at their service, and crowds sat outside and sang songs all day, or cheered if any dwarf showed so much as his nose. Some of the songs were old ones, but some of them were quite new, and spoke confidently of the sudden death of the dragon and of cargoes of rich presents coming down to the river to Lake Town. These were inspired largely by the master, and they did not particularly please the dwarfs, but in the meantime they were contented, and they quickly grew fat and strong again. Indeed, within a week they were quite recovered, fitted out in fine cloth of their proper colours, with beards combed and trimmed, and proud steps. Thorin looked and walked as if his kingdom were already regained, and Smaug chopped up into little pieces. Then, as he had said, the dwarf's good feeling towards the little hobbit grew stronger every day. There were no more groans or grumbles. They drank his health, and they patted him on the back, and they made a great fuss of him, which was just as well, for he was not feeling particularly cheerful. He had not forgotten the look of the mountain, nor the thought of the dragon, and he had besides a shocking cold. For 3 days he sneezed and coughed, and he could not go out, and even after that his speeches at banquets were limited to, "Thank you very much." Okay, we're going to stop there, and we're going to now go away, and we're going to start our reading activity. And your reading activity today is you are going to pretend to be a news reporter. You're a news reporter in Lake Town, which is where the dwarves have just arrived, and they've said and told you that they're going to try and take back their home under the mountain. So if you're a news reporter, you need to now think of 5 questions you could ask the dwarves to try and learn more about their quest. So you need to think of 5 questions you could ask the dwarves to try and learn more about their quest. And then I want you to explain your thinking for picking these questions. Why are you going to choose that question? How are you going to learn about the dwarves' quest from it? And I want you to explain your thinking for each individual question. So you might say, well, one of the questions I'm going to ask them is, how are you going to reclaim the gold? And you might ask that question because then you might learn the plans of the dwarves for taking back the mountain. So you need to think of 5 questions you could ask the dwarves if you're a news reporter to learn more about their quest and explain their thinking. Go away now and have a go at the reading activity, and I can't wait to think of what questions you come up with.